allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call council, please. Councilmember Gratz. Here. Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember Kay.
Here.
Councilmember Knudsen. Here. Councilmember Fancher.
Here.
Councilmember Steiger.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Are there any changes or additions to tonight's agenda? Hearing no consent, can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Move to approve the agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Next we have audience comment. I only have one form up here. Don Thompson.
Don Thompson, 416 Second Avenue Southeast, the city. I'm hearing information. I have been to a couple of meetings, so I'm trying to stay out of trouble, but it ain't working. About city administrator. It's going to be extra salary. And that brings up some questions I have. One, is the city growing that big where you need somebody full-time to sit behind a desk and babysit the town? Two, wouldn't that money be better used filling the vacant sergeant's slot, or hiring a couple of detectives to specially train to take care of our drug problems that we're in the area that's growing more and more all the time? Take a proactive step in that area. And again, is our department heads, are they capable of making decisions on a day-to-day basis for minor things like, if I have to repair a water pipe and I don't have the part, what do I do? Or the city finance officer has to decide where he's going to put the debits or credits. It's, I don't understand exactly what's going on here. This has been brought up many times before by several previous mayors. And I think the money can be spent in other areas, maybe even a skate park. Let's develop this ground over here for a city park. There's many things we could do that I don't think having a full-time administrator sit in the city is really needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other persons that have anything for public comment this evening? Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close that portion of tonight's meeting. We'll now open up the public hearing for the 2015-2020 6-year Transportation Improvement Program, and I will turn it over to you, Mr. Morgan.
Here.
Do we need that light off?
It probably would be easier for people to see what's going on. Thank you, sir. So, every year we're required to do a 6-year transportation improvement plan. It's called the TIP Transportation Improvement Plan. It gets incorporated in the state's transportation improvement plan, and this is what the federal government uses to allocate funding to the various states from the taxes collected at the federal level for transportation infrastructure improvements. So that's why we do go through this exercise. Now, the City of Pacific has numerous different classifications of streets. Some are federally classified, but not all of our streets are federally classified. Grant monies generally are only available to those roads that are federally classified. Arterials that we have that are federally classified are Stewart Road, Valentine Avenue, and West Valley. Stewart Road's listed twice because there's 4 different projects proposed for our STIP, or our TIP, in the next 6-year transportation improvement plan. The first one is one that actually will be starting construction in the next couple of weeks, and that is the construction of Stewart Road from West Valley, actually from the on-ramps of 167, on the northbound ramps of 167 to Valentine Avenue. The second Stewart Road project is a future project which would be to construct the rest of Stewart Road from Valentine Avenue to the bridge. The city of Sumner is responsible for construction of the bridge and everything east of there. And they already have funding for the design of the bridge, so we're trying to work in cooperation with Sumner to a point where we can design our section of Stewart Road and then bid the whole project for construction at one time. That way we only have to be out there one more time with construction and creating traffic problems. The other project, which will be starting within the next month or two, is Valentine Avenue. We opened bids on that, or Sumner opened bids on that project last week. And so that project's going to be starting relatively soon. And that will construct Valentine Avenue in the city of Pacific from 16th Street, which is the dividing line between Sumner and Pacific, all the way up to County Line Road. The project actually starts at 24th. There will be a new signal there. And then the other project that we have that's in the arterial classification is West Valley Highway. We, a couple of years ago, received funding to design this project from County Line Road up to the northern corporate limits at where First Street would intersect West Valley, however it doesn't cross under 167. We just received notice that we are going to be receiving some more funding to design from County Line Road south to Jovita. So we'll make an addendum to the contract that we have with the current designer to extend their contract to design the whole corridor. The reason we were awarded this money for this last section was because we already had the first section under design, and we could obligate the money fairly quickly and move it forward. One of the things that happens is they don't want to award grant monies to an agency and then have it sit around for several years and not be used. Because if it does, then the agencies further up going, why do we give you this money if you're not spending it? They want to see projects being done, because that's what helps move the economy along, as well as getting needed infrastructure repaired. We have numerous collector and local streets. Again, all the numbers in parentheses represent the order that they're listed in the STIP for this time. Milwaukee Boulevard, we just submitted an application for funding for the construction of Milwaukee Boulevard, and this is to construct improvements from Ellington Road all the way down to 5th Street. There's some sidewalks in need of repair in this section that will be repaired, and then there's some sections that do not have sidewalks where we will be constructing new sidewalks. We'll be doing a variety of grind and overlay, some patchwork where the road's in really bad shape, and try and smooth that road out a little bit. 3rd Avenue, this summer we will be overlaying 3rd Avenue from Chicago Boulevard to Butte. We received some money last year from TIB for that project. Some future projects will then be to do a similar treatment to 3rd Avenue from West Valley up to Chicago, and then pick up 3rd Avenue from Butte down to Pacific Avenue. Project 13 in parentheses there, South 51st Avenue. It's up on West Hill. Most of this road is a gravel road that's needed to be repaired. It gets a lot of traffic. Unfortunately, that project does not qualify for most of the grants we've been seeing so far, because most of those grants, again, as I said, are usually applied to federally classified routes, and that is not one. However, sometimes the Department of Transportation at state level does have money for smaller projects, so by having it listed, we'll see that this is a project we're serious about, and that it opens up the doors and opportunities a little bit better for us. Frontage Road is another project. Again, this is a federally classified road. If you've driven that road, you'll know that in a few areas there's missing sidewalks in a couple of areas. Sidewalks are falling away in some other areas. There's a couple of humps where there's culverts under the roads where the rest of the road is settled, but the road where the culvert is, it's held it up, so you sort of have some built-in speed bumps there. In a couple of years, I had a meeting with King County this morning. In a couple of years, they're proposing to add a new force main from the sewage lift station there on 1st Avenue up north to their treatment plant in Renton. So they're going to be doing some work in Frontage Road. So any repairs we do to Frontage Road, we will do after King County has gone in and done their project. We don't want to do a road project and then have them just tear it up afterwards. Pacific Avenue is another project. We did some patchwork out there a couple of years ago. However, what we'd like to do is do an overlay, smooth out the road a little bit, maybe if we need to do some more selective patching, we can do it. And also, if there's some sidewalk gaps out there that we'd like to get those filled in as well. And then the rest of this is listed as Project 15, which is just some generic overlay and rehabilitation throughout the city. And those will be projects as we have funds available, or if grant opportunities come up where we may be able to do some preservation. But sometimes some of the state programs they will have money set aside strictly for preservation. They realize smaller cities have a difficult time raising revenue for preservation, and it's important to catch it before the roads get too far down the way, where then you have to rebuild them. It's better to protect them now as opposed to later. Then we have a series of non-motorized facilities, and then usually there's some separate granting opportunities for those. When we go for the arterials through federal money, the federal money will also fund non-motorized projects. So Stewart Road, which will be constructed next year, the Stewart Road Valentine Avenue projects are 2-year projects. There's so much work that needs to be done there, it can't be done in a single year. So what will happen is most of the utility work will be done this year, then they'll shut down for the winter if it starts to get too bad. We will restart things up next spring, and the paving will be done next year on these projects, or the final paving anyway. At that time, we will be bidding the interurban trail along Stewart Road, because we'll have a contractor out there who's getting ready to pave. A lot of times we get good prices. I'm in the neighborhood, I might as well throw a bid out there since I'm already going to be there. We can get, a lot of times we get better prices for those guys. The interurban trail is a P.S.E. corridor. That's to extend it from 3rd Avenue down all the way to Stewart Road. We've had some private development through that section that have built portions of the trail. And what this project is to close in some of those missing gaps. P.S.E. has already given us easements in their property, so we don't have to go out and acquire land. We've got some property we purchased for wetland mitigation, because unfortunately that corridor has some wetlands. However, we can mitigate by doing some development in other locations, and we've already purchased some of the property for that. Interurban trail on West Valley. This would be a connector to tie in what we leave off at 3rd Avenue, across to West Valley, and then up to the city of Edgewood. This is an important element of our infrastructure, because if we have a catastrophe down here in the valley, train wreck, spills some toxic product, or we have flooding, and all of a sudden the streets start getting crowded and people can't get out, at least you can be able to walk out with a safe route if we have this trail available to us. So that's part of the purpose of that, as well as a transportation mode, because we do have people that do like to ride their bikes to work, and having them separated from the rest of the traffic is helpful. And then Project 14 is just some sidewalk improvements as funding opportunities are available. This sort of outlays where some of these trail projects are. The areas in red are where we have gaps along the P.S.E. corridor, and then blue is the section that we're getting ready to build down there on Stewart Road to tie in to the Sumner Trail system when we eventually meet that cross bridge section. The green sections have already been constructed, and then the blue obviously is the section that will go up Jovita, somewhere in that area to tie into Edgewood. Now, the STIP, as we've prepared it, has a little over $25 million worth of infrastructure proposed. We're estimating that we can get about a little over $12 million in federal monies for these projects, another not quite $10 million in state money, and then we have a local commitment of $3.7 million. That's over the next 6 years. Some of this stuff has already been programmed, because again, we've got a couple projects, Stewart Road and Valentine Avenue, and even the trail on Stewart Road have already been programmed into the system. So we need to find a way to start putting money away for these other local matches, because one of the things that is we've been filling out grant applications is they want to see proof that you actually have been planning for these in your budget, so that you're able to meet your obligation to provide your local match. Fortunately, we had those for the ones we went for this year. This is a map of the program of the project. Unfortunately, at this scale, it's very difficult to read. if someone wants a copy of this, if you send me an email, I can email you this. It's an 11 by 17, but it's got all the numbers that match up with the priorities listed in the STIP. But you can sort of see how they're dispersed around the city. The blue lines are primarily overlay, minor reconstruction. The green lines are probably more detailed reconstruction projects. One project listed, somehow I might have missed it or walked past it, is over by the park. It's a project to raise 3rd Avenue to get that project so that it can also serve as a levee. That way we could get rid of the HESCO barriers in the park and have an elevated road there serve for the same function. Oops, I got that in there twice. Some future projects that are not on the tip this time. Ellington Road, some upgrades to the signal there are needed within the next few years. There's upcoming requirements for pedestrian crossings. We need to change some of those. And then as that road gets busier, it'd be nice to possibly try and construct some turn pockets in up there. These are projects we might like to have. They're a little bit lower priority than some of the other ones that we have listed in the SIP. But we've also have some different zoning up there now, so these can also be projects that if developers decide to go into the property across Ellington from Alpac Elementary, for example, we can require them to provide some contribution to make some of these improvements. Butte Avenue improvements on the south end, again, we're looking at the potential for trying to raise that road if we can, similar to what we're doing on 3rd Avenue, let that serve as a setback levee as well to protect the properties on the west side of the road from flooding. One of the things that's interesting is Butte Avenue is federally classified in the King County portion. It is not in the Pierce County portion. So one of my projects is to try and get the Pierce County portion that's federally classified so that it will qualify for some grant money. Another future project will be Thornton Avenue. Right now it's 2-lane road, both directions. What we'll do is we'll look at some options for that road probably after we complete the Valentine Avenue projects. Probably look at similar construction methodologies and approach that we used on Valentine for that section of Thornton Avenue. And then possibly a trail to loop from the park back down so that you'd have a nice trail network around this whole southern part of the city where you could start out in the park or anywhere along 3rd Avenue. You would be able to go over the interurban trail down to Stewart Road, walk over to Butte Avenue, and then go right back up Butte Avenue to 3rd Avenue. And if you lived anywhere along that trail, you'd have a nice little trail loop to work. There's some other projects that aren't on the STIP. We've got a couple of 3 neighborhoods that are in need of reconstruction. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find grant opportunities for these types of projects. And so we're going to have to find another approach to how we might be able to do that. That's Sundown Meadows, which and the Shire are both in the northeasterly corner of the city. The north of First. The Shire is just south of the Cabo Court Apartments. Sundown Meadows is just south of the Pacifica Apartments. And then Mountain View Estates is north of 2nd Avenue Southwest at Glacier, and there's 2 streets in there that sort of comprise the Mountain View Estates area. And then chip seal program and overlay. We've got some streets that were built 20, 30 years ago that are actually not in too bad a shape. But the one thing we want to do is make sure that we're preserving those roads so they don't get in as bad a shape as some of the other ones are. So that, and chip seal is a cost-effective way of doing that. Some people have objections to chip seal. Overlay is another option. It is more costly, and we just would have to plan it accordingly. We've got some sidewalks that are in need of repair throughout the city, so we need to find some ways where we can maybe incorporate those into a couple of other sidewalk programs. Earlier I mentioned some sidewalks throughout the city. We did apply for a grant, have not heard back yet, and that's for some sidewalks on 2nd Avenue Southwest. It's the Safe Routes to School program. This is to try and find ways for students to be able to walk to school in a safe manner, get them off the road. 2nd Avenue Southwest. Sidewalks are not in the greatest of shape, and they're not very wide. They're narrow. They were built 50, 60 years ago. So if we can get that grant, then it'd be a nice opportunity to be able to add some sidewalks. There's a lot of multifamily housing that would be served by that, so we get some extra bang for our buck there. And that is the end of the presentation for the TNB. For the
Thank you, Jim. Nicely done. So, are there any questions from council? Okay, and now I'd now like to open up for any public comment. Come on up.
Yeah, in case someone has a question.
Dwayne Gratz, 122 3rd Avenue Northwest. Great presentation. Just have a quick question on the non-tip projects. Those are not included in item, I guess it should be priority 15 on your list that you sent out today?
Technically, they're not provided, but
because I see preservation, repair, and overlay with sidewalk improvements.
They're intentionally written vague, so that if there is a grant opportunity, I can say that, yes, they are on the tip. We included those.
Because you are looking at federal
way.
money, or state money too, for those.
Correct.
I see. That's how that works.
Correct.
Is there a map that shows the non-tip projects? Because
I
you had a color one for the tip projects.
I did not provide one. I could probably stick one. I could add it to that one.
So you already have one, you just...
Well, I know where they are. I haven't actually created a map, but I could take that existing map, add it to there, and have it available.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I know when the park board, we were driving around looking at parks Saturday before last, saw a lot of places where it's kind of pretty rough, like, so I'm kind of curious if those are, where those are on the...
one of them would be by a park. There's a...
well, we had to drive everywhere to get to
Meadows.
the parks, you know,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Sundown Meadows, there is a piece of property in there that I guess is a park, and I don't know if it's actually used for anything.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back to the park list now that I think about it.
Yeah, well, we drove up where the old water tank was, right, for instance.
The old reservoir.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a gravel something or other.
And there's not any intention of improving that road.
Uh-huh.
There is the possibility of maybe making minor improvements up to where it's still fairly level, putting some bollards across the road and allow people...
Yeah, we weren't really sure where the road was in relation
right.
to where it should have been, within the right of way.
That road is, my recollection is all within the right of way.
Because there's been a lot of bulldozing and...
We have had it staked out there. There are there are a few right-of-way stakes.
Yeah, there's like
look in the right.
maybe one.
Some of them have probably been removed.
Right. Pretty rough up there. So, anyway, I just wanted to know where the other projects are, potentially, if you got funding.
I could put some of those on there.
So the plan is, unless we get some kind of a grant from somewhere, we don't really have the bucks to do a lot of these kinds of projects. So.
No, because as you see, we're the TIP right now has a commitment of $3.7 million. Some of that funding, probably half of that's going to come from an LID for Valentine Avenue. So, because that covers part of our match for that project. We are assessing the possibility of putting some transportation impact fees in place, which would also provide some funding for streets.
Okay. So when you look at this chart, it shows, just look, if you're looking at item 15, which is labeled item 14, I guess.
The earlier version, yes, does have the 14. There's a duplicate 14, because I was going through that trying to finalize the presentation for today.
So when you look on the chart, it says federal fund code and state fund code.
Correct.
They both have the same 275K there.
Yes.
So it's not like the money twice, it's just, it's under
It's two projects. And that I can address.
Because the total adds up to 275, so you would think that, yeah, second year there's 275, fourth year there's 275, fifth and sixth. So is that 275 each year? Is that kind of how that works? That's the plan?
As you look down to that, what you would look up also above, there's two charts. One says funding.
Okay, so that's 740.
And then the other one has expenditure, which shows the year those expenditures would fall into
Okay,
place.
so you're taking the 740 and dividing it up into second year, fourth year.
Correct.
I got it, okay.
And
that's all the questions I had.
And I can actually explain that one. What happens is TIB periodically does road preservation. which is what we're doing out here on 3rd Avenue this summer. King County will actually, has incorporated this project in their county-wide project because they can solicit bids on a whole bunch of this work, get a better price, and so their contract will actually be doing the overlay out here. That's money that's coming from the state through TIB and their preservation program. And I've just sort of said, okay, every other year I'm planning that we're going to hopefully be able to pick up a chunk of money for that, for preservation. So that's why I've got that 275 listed every other year then.
So the proof will be what you actually get, and then you modify the chart accordingly.
Well, this is strictly plan and budget. It's not what actually happens, and then when actually happens, usually it happens this year. Well, we're now planning for the next year, so this year's has fallen off.
So do you update this every year?
This is updated every year.
Oh, okay. That's all I
Things get slid forward, and we adjust as we get better information, reevaluate costs.
I was just curious where all the miscellaneous and sundry little projects are going to happen.
Where we'd like them to happen.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. Is there any other public comment this evening?
Let's see if I can get that. Would you mind putting up the largest map you have of the city with the blue dots? And does anybody happen to have a laser pointer I could borrow? Because, no?
What?
Laser pointer?
No.
Ah, okay. Hi. Jean Fancher, 37248 55th Avenue South. I've asked the city engineer to put up the map of the city with the, back 3 or 4 more slides. There you go. Thank you very much. Not that one.
Oh, the other one.
Oh, you want the one that's just a small portion, yeah.
Yeah, that one's good enough.
Okay.
I live on the West Hill. We've been part of the city for 105 years this coming August, on the anniversary of the city's incorporation. We were a part of the city when the city was incorporated in platted by Mr. Hillman in 1906. But first issue I'd like to bring up is not about those of us on West Hill, but those of you who are in the valley. And I noticed Mr. Morgan did comment on using the interurban trail for Javita Boulevard as a way to leave the city in case of some kind of an emergency. The Stewart Road Trail and underpass under 167, the lower dotted purpley blue line, would help the people in the south end of the city, but not the folks in the north end of the city. Right now, the county road coming off the hill, which we grew up calling the Algona Grade and the Pacific Grade, are both closed to traffic, which means the only route to the north is to head up towards Peasley Canyon. I would like to suggest that some money be put in the TIP plan for studying LAHAR evacuation routes or disaster evacuation routes for those of the city residents who live in the valley.
Are you talking vehicles?
No, I'm talking foot traffic. And I would like to suggest that the 2 closed roads, the Algona Grade and the Pacific Grade, be considered. And briefly mentioned some work on 3rd Avenue west of West Valley Highway going up between several city lots known as the West Hill Passive Park. The grade does get steeper, about 200 or 300 feet up past the past the beginning of the West Hill Passive Park. But a study for a LAHAR could determine perhaps the depth that the LAHAR would be and the amount of paved area and trail that could be accessible by people to at least group above the flood level. Also, when the water tower was still up, there was a proposal made to wrap the stairs around it and have a bridge to 3rd Avenue above the water tower, which connects with 51st, which I see on the map or was mentioned on the list for some paving. That would connect with the King County roads. So that's one possibility for an addition to the TIP plan, is money to study future projects. Another problem that I don't see addressed, is one discussed years ago, was the kids using the railroad track bridge to get across the White River taking the shortcut rather than going around to the underpass on Ellingston. The city does have right-of-way for Skinner Road that extends across the river. Study for a bridge between Skinner Road and the West Valley, and an underpass under the railroad tracks. I know it was tabled at one time because the railroad planned to widen from 2 tracks to 3. So if we could find money for a 2-track tunnel under the railroad, how about a little more money, or asking for a study, see how much it would cost to extend that tunnel another 20 feet, maybe the width of this room, so there would be a safer pedestrian crossing of the railroad tracks, and one that would be closer to the trail system, and reduce the risk for the kids who want to cross the tracks or use the railroad bridge, keeping them off the tracks and not climbing over, around, and through barbed wire and chain link and razor wire fences. Third, those of us on the West Hill have depended on the Algona and Pacific grade for at least 60 years that I can recall. At one way, each road was a 2-way road. Now one of the roads has dropped off and moved a house, and one of the other roads is caved out underneath. It would cost a bit of money to fix those, so I would like to request that the city put into its transportation plan some helper money to help King County come up with some ideas to fix that. As it is, emergency vehicles coming to West Hill have to drive to Chavita Canyon, and if that happens to be blocked by a landslide or paving, they may get through the paving, but not the landslide. They'll have to go to Peasley Canyon, about 4 miles to the north, or go all the way down to the Edgewood, Old Sumner Edgewood Highway, Edgewood Heights Road. So that puts a real crimp on things. There's as Mr. Cave pointed out when he mentioned his fire department service, there is an interlocal agreement between the Valley Regional Fire Authority and King County Regional Fire Authority for South King County to assist or send a truck if there's a fire. That's about 4 minutes, 5 miles over by Lakeland Elementary for the fire station. But as we learned a couple of weeks ago on an aid call, there isn't such an agreement for a lower level call. So it still means that either the police or the fire department is going to have to make a 4 or 5 mile trip to get to some of the residents on the West Hill. It really would be nice to see our area included in these plans, especially because we've been paying taxes into the city since it was incorporated, 104 years, 105 years this August. And it would be nice to have some connection with the lower valley or with the valley via the Algona grade roads or via a trail, be it paved or not, on the Water Tower Road. I know there's an elevation change of about 70 feet right at the Water Tower. It's about a 250 elevation change between West Valley Highway and 51st Street. But let's put some money into studying these issues rather than just not even mentioning them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other further public comments this evening? Second ask for public comment on this item this evening. Okay, final call for public comment on this item this evening. Seeing none, that closes the public hearing.